Okay, so let's go ahead and say that you're all done. You've edited your drawing down. This is the size you want. These are all the walls you need. And now you're ready to start actually making it a drawing to submit or show off to the technicians or anyone else. So, right now you have the drawing in your window with your paper being an 11 by 17 and the actual drawing being a 6 by 4 and a half, we'll say, just estimate. Okay, well, we're going to have to use some resources to actually make this presentable. So, what I typically do is I'll go to the previous drawing that was done, either by me or by someone else, and I'll just reuse the resources that are there. Alternatively, there should be some files called legend pieces or drawing layout basic or things of that nature that will get put onto the file server or your computer itself, and you can use those if you want to start from scratch if ever, but generally I'll use the last drawing I've worked on so that way I'll have the most up-to-date things, because things tend to get added in or modified or just little things that get changed, and if I ever make a change to the tools I know that the most latest one's there because it was the last thing I used. So you're going to go ahead and navigate through file, finding your, or file open, or just by clicking the little envelope. It's the same thing. Or control open, or control O for open. And you can navigate to one of those two. But I'm going to go ahead and open up a file that's already been done. This has already been submitted and it was ready to go and it passed and everything's good. So I'm just going to reuse those tools. And I've gone ahead and opened it up already, and it's now in the background. So what I'm going to do is these little, just like with Corel Paint, Photo Paint, these set of X's and boxes are for other drawings inside of the control suite. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the windowed mode, and you can see I have two drawings here. I have this one that we're working on, and then I have this one that's from a different drawing, and it's already been finished. So what I can do is one of two things. Either A, I can drag this drawing into there, or I can drag all of this, you have to click on it to select it, I can drag all of this over here. Now whenever you open it, let's go ahead and undo that. Whenever you open whichever one you're going to choose, it's going to be full screened. So again, all you need to do in order to see both is this by clicking on the little windowed, and you'll have this here, and you'll have this one either here or down here in the corner sometimes. So for this to bring it bigger, you can either click on the little double windows to restore, or the windowed mode full screen mode to toggle between those two. So let's go ahead and just do this. I'm going to go ahead, and what I typically do is I'll just highlight everything, because everything's its own little thing. I'm going to go ahead and cut or copy. It doesn't really matter. It does the same effect. From this point, I can either close or I can just minimize. I'm going to minimize. I'm going to bring the other window back up by maximizing it by either double clicking on the little header or by clicking on the maximize. And then what I'm going to do is, because this is all going to get thrown over, I'm going to escort my little drawing that I have right there over to the side so that way it won't get lost underneath everything. So I'm going to right click paste. Over there I right click copied or cut, and I'm going to right click paste. Now that drawing was much bigger than our little 11 by 17 is, so it has absolutely swamped that piece of paper. You can see this one in all of its entirety is 38 by 32, 31 and a quarter, but it's much bigger than our 11 by 17 page. But our drawing is small. We don't need all this massive space, so we're going to leave the page alone. But what we are going to do is get rid of the things we don't need. So right now, off the top of the bat, I can tell you I don't need this drawing because we're using a new drawing. Now I just clicked and I selected you could think either the drawing or the box, because this box, these corners are selected around this entire space. I don't know if it's this gray box that's here, because there is a gray box here, which is an object, and then there's the drawing itself. I won't know until either I delete it and regret it, or I move it. So just by moving it, you can see I selected the gray box. And the reason why I click the gray box instead of the drawing, even though I'm actually clicking the drawing itself, I'm clicking on a wall. I am not actually selecting it. And that's because of layers. You can think of these as like laying a piece of paper on top of another one, or laying a piece of glass on top of a piece of paper or something you see. Just because you can see through it doesn't mean it's there. This gray box is actually, you can think of as a window frame. So this window frame is on top of this drawing just as an outline. But what's inside of it is actually still space. Even though this is clear space, you still have to interact with it. So even though I'm not clicking on the edge, which is what you would think would be the object, the whole area inside of it is still actually the object itself. So we can do one of two things. Either A, we can move it out of the way and then work with our drawing. And you can see I actually clicked on an actual device there. And by clicking on the drawing itself, I've clicked on this whole big gray box again because, well, it's also a window pane. But I can do one of two things. Either A, I can move it, which I have, or if I want to leave it here, what I can do is send to back. And this is going to be the thing you're going to mostly do for working with objects in general, because you don't want to disturb the way things are. And it can get kind of tricky every once in a while, but as long as you just follow the steps, you'll eventually get to where you're trying to go. So I've clicked the object. I'm now going to right click it. You can't see this right now, but when you do it, you'll be able to see. There's it's like eighth from the bottom. Okay, so starting from the bottom, I right click. From the bottom, there's order. Okay, and there'll be options here. Whenever you do it, you'll be able to see it's to the front of page, to the back of page, to the front of layer, to the back of layer, forward one, back one, in front of, or behind. The general easy ones to do, and I'll go ahead and write this out for you. It's to back of page, to front of page. And that's pretty much it. The other ones were to front of layer, and to back of layer. So these are pretty much the two different groups you're going to work with, either to your layers or to your pages. Generally, I like to do pages because I don't know what else is behind things and what's over on the sides and things like that. When you do it to the back of the page, it does it to the entire back of the document. Everything that is here, whether you can see it or not. If you do it to the back of layer, it's only the things that it is currently on top of. For example, if I have, we'll say, this text box, okay, and this text box, and this text box, okay. So if I have these things right here, right now these text boxes are beneath this text, okay. But if all I did, let's grab this, come on. If I grab this, so these are the newest items, so they're on top of absolutely everything. Everything else is below these two, okay. But if, for example, I got these two things, you can see just right here, this gray box is underneath this gray box and the text because it's not going through it. Okay, this text and the gray box are separate from each other. So if I sent this to the back of the page, this gray box you can see actually has white to it. And the reason why that is so that way it can hide things that it goes on top of. So for example, if you have words on a drawing or something and you don't want to actually erase it, you just want to cover it up, you can put this text box on top of it and cover it up. But you can see here that this gray box is actually on top of the words, but not these words, because I put these words, or this text, I set it to the back of the page. So that means this bar right here is able to sit on top of it, and I can actually like block out lines and things like that if I wanted to. But this will go even on top of that, so you can see that. Then even still, like I said, these are on top of everything, so I can put this on top of everything. Now it's just a big old mess, but hopefully you understand my point. Okay, this white box and is beneath this white box, or this square that has no color inside of it, but it's completely covering the text that I just had. Now, going back to the whole front of layer, back of layer, front of page, back of page, that all worked because I set this text box to the back of the page. However, if what covers it? Okay, so this right now, this gray box, is on top of this box. Okay, this text is beneath this box. Okay, if I wanted it to be on top of everything, I would go to the front of page. And now it covers the gray squares. Let's move it to somewhere that's easier to read. It now covers on top of the gray squares and on top of this white box with the signature square and this text inside of it. Okay, but if I was over here, let's go ahead and set it back to the back of box, to the back of page. Okay, so now it's back to where it was. If I do to the front of layer, it's only going to put it on top of this one signature square, this box right here, because of the fact that it's to the front of the layer. Everything that was on top of this is now below this. But as soon as I move this over here, it should go behind it. Oh, it didn't go behind. That's weird. Okay, well, ignore that. There's details to it and there's specifications to it, but generally it's just better to do back of page to the front of page, because then you don't have to mess with any of the layers and things and stuff like that. Because if you do happen to have layers, then you're going to start messing things up. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and undo all of these movements, and hopefully that'll reset everything back to the way it was. Okay, so that was too far. So I'm going to put my paste back in. There we go. Okay. So, this gray box, I am going to click it, move it to the back of page. Next, I have this bigger box, which surrounds all of it. I'm going to send that to the back of page. And now the next thing is the drawing itself, because you can tell just barely that this box is not any of the other boxes. It's actually the drawing itself. It doesn't go as far as the corners. So as soon as I grab this, it's going to move. Okay, and that's the paper behind it. Okay. So now I don't want to just do this and drag it over to get rid of it and then grab each and every single one of those in order to move them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a trick, which is because I can tell that this box does not extend out as far as the gray squares, I'm actually going to try to grab it by highlighting everything inside of the gray box, but not the gray box itself. And if I'm skilled enough, I can actually do it. So I didn't grab the gray square, at least I hope I didn't, and I was able to select all these little symbols, everything there, the lines, everything. And now when I drag this, it's going to drag all of it. And there we go. The boxes stayed still, and the only thing that moved was the drawing with the symbols on it. Now, let's say you try to do it, but you haven't had enough practice. So let's say I'm zoomed out this far, and I'm going to select everything inside the drawing. I don't want to select this over here on the left, and I don't want to select this over here on the right. So I just kind of guess it. Okay, so I've selected all of that. Even though the gray square is beneath everything, if you do that kind of highlight selection, it will still be selected regardless of where it is as far as layers on the page. So now when I drag this, I drag the square too. And that's not what I want. So you can kind of just mix and match. You can drag the drawing first, then do the smaller things, and drag those off. But you're going to lose your positioning. So you'll have to be careful with that if you try doing that later on. So I'm going to delete these because I don't need them. Off to the side, this is the whole point of doing this, is off to the side of the actual drawing itself is the basics of using your drawing. Okay, you have your template squares and you have your distance measurements. This is a digital ruler that's actually 1-to-1. Same thing with the templates. You have your symbols that you're going to use, as well as some that aren't there. You can make them as you need them or import them as you need them. We'll go over that later. You have your legend, your device legend, with individual numbers. These are actual individual texts that you can then edit. So if I don't have 38, I only have 5, I can sit there and make that a 35. I need to click off and go back to my selection tool. And now it's a 5. Okay. We'll go over how to edit text in a little bit. And I have my signature square, that is to the appropriate size. This should never, ever, ever, legend square and signature should never be resized, because then you'll throw off the size of the signature square and chaos will ensue. But anyway, you have your voltage drop calculator here. That will be imported at a later time. But for now, because this is something that is not editable, this is actually a picture itself, just like the drawing, you'll have to go ahead and delete it, and you'll have to import a new one whenever you're done with your calculations. You have your battery calculations, which has its text header here. This is the only thing that is editable, and the only thing that needs to be edited in most cases. And all the rest of it is also a picture, just like the previously mentioned. Voltage drops. You have the company logo, which can be edited, resized, moved around, anything you want, which is a composition of a gray square and the actual JPEG itself. You have the sequence of operations, which is, as you've seen here, this one is grouped together with the text and the gray square, unlike the one over to the side. We'll go over the differences in a little bit, but the reason why there's two different sets is this is a this is 3 floor programming versus all floor programming. So that's the reason for the two different squares. This one is bigger just simply because it was more appropriate to fill up space and it looked nicer. That's pretty much all that was. This doesn't need to be any specific size, but it should be readable. Legible. You have your general format as to the description of the drawing. Typically, I like to do the space or level that the place is being taken care of at, and the actual title of the job, followed by the address, city, state, and zip code. Now this can be rearranged either way around. It doesn't matter. It's just whichever one looks nicer for the specific drawing. You can swap it around like that. Either way around, it doesn't matter, as long as you have it on the drawing. And that's pretty much it. Other than that, this is if your this is a reminder that these are actual one-to-one scalings as well as the ruler. So I just kind of put that to remind myself that this is one-to-one. You can actually figure it out, and we're going to show an example that it's actually one-to-one. So we're going to go ahead and come over here, drag the drawing in, and this is very big for a drawing to be so small. So what we're going to do is, because all of this doesn't matter except for this, I'm going to remove this off to the side, and what I can do is grab this, and you know what, let's drag the voltage drop calculator, or the battery calculations out as well. I'm going to highlight that, select it again. Again, I wanted to drag the gray square with it, so I selected the gray square. You can see there's about 4, or actually there's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the big one, and then 7 squares here that are gray squares, excluding this one that goes over the battery calculations and the signature square, which is, I don't believe that, yeah, that's its own square. It's actually black, not gray. Okay, so what we're going to do is, like I was saying, we're going to fit this to the drawing itself. So we're going to highlight everything except for the drawing, because I want the drawing out. I don't want to scale that. I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm just going to grab it by its corner and proportionally shrink it down. That looks good. So we're going to put that here. We're going to put our drawing back there. And now this kind of fits. But it still doesn't look right, so I'm going to go ahead and stretch it out. And that looks pretty good. The lines look a little thick, but we'll go over that in a little bit. The text is a little odd, and we'll fix that in a little bit as well. So we'll put the drawing in the center. This square I like to keep for the drawing itself. So I'm going to size this down to about there. So before we start getting worked on the drawing, we're going to have to check the scale of the drawing. If the scale of the drawing is off, there's no point to anything, because everything's going to be off. So what we need to do is we need to check the scale. We use a 3/8 scale equals a door, because rather we use a 1/8 scale equals a foot, which translates out to these doors being approximately 3 feet. There we go. That's what I meant to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually measure the space between here to here as if it were actually printed out. The way I do that is I have to go up to these rulers that are at the top of the screen. You can see this one starts at 9 7/8 to 10, so on and so on. And this ruler on the side, which starts at 2 7, what is that? 2 7/16 or something. I don't know. It's off the screen. But yeah, it is 2 7/16. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the 0. And what this does is right now these rulers are measuring from a point on the paper, which is at 0. Okay, but I don't care about where that point is. I care about the point I'm measuring from, which is from here to here. That's all I need to know, is that distance down. So I could kind of guesstimate if you see the mouse lines up with this dashed line on the left hand and it lines up with this dashed line on top, and I could guesstimate, okay, that's 2 and I don't know, 3/30 seconds, and then this is, I don't know, something else. But you don't need to guess. You can just come over here. As you put your mouse at the point where these two rulers meet, it'll turn blue or blue-gray. You can click and hold, drag it out, and you can see I now have a cross that is going across the entire screen up and down. This is setting my new 0. So what I'm going to do is I only care about my vertical right now. I want my vertical to be correct. My left and right doesn't need to be perfect. It just has to be somewhere on one of these corners is what I like to do. But I'm going to set my line exactly in the center of this black spot of the door. And that's going to give me approximately the start of the door hinge. I'm going to let go. Now you can see my rulers have switched to this being the 0, because that's where I let go of the mouse whenever I was on the X axis. And the Y axis, the up and down, your vertical, was here, which perfectly lines up with the door. So now I have my 0 here. I'm looking for 3/8 of an inch for this doorway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my mouse down and I'm going to line it up with this doorway end. Okay? And I can look across to the left, and we're at about 1/4 of an inch. That's not 3/8 of an inch. 3/8 of an inch is down here. If I drag it back out, it should be about here. So this doorway needs to stretch. Okay? And I'm not going to do it disproportionately, because otherwise these doors would get thrown off. And I can confirm that this door was 1/4 just by coming over here. This door is about 1/4. It's a little bit more than a fourth. And I can come over here, do the same thing, go up to the corners where the rulers meet, put it down with this black line vertically, because now I'm doing the horizontal. I'm going to put it in the center of the door's hinge. Okay? And now my 0 is up here. I'm going to go across to the left, and it's still, again, just a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. That's not good enough. But at least we confirmed it is proportionate to its left and right and its up and down. So I'm going to select the drawing. Again, this is the newest item on the drawing at this moment, so it's going to be on top. Okay? So if I wanted to, I could confirm that by right-clicking on it, order, top of page. Now it's on top of everything. Okay, for sure, and I don't have to do any guessing. Okay? So I've clicked on it. I'm going to set it in the bottom corner because that's where I like to put it. And I'm going to stretch it to the upper right. And I'm just kind of guessing because I don't know exactly how much this is going to stretch it by. I can look in the upper right, or upper left, I'm sorry, and it'll tell me by how much percentage it's increasing it. But I think about there's good. So now I'm going to go in. I'm going to reset my 0 a little bit faster this time. And I'm going to measure down. 3/8 of an inch is still down here. You can see across to the left. Follow that dotted line as you drag it out to the right. And you can see 3/8 of an inch is here. We're about a little bit past 5/16. So we're not quite there yet. So again, I'm going to stretch it out proportionally by dragging the corner. And you can see, because this is on top, I left white space at the top, and that's now covering the gray square. We're going to have to do something about that later. I'll show you how in a second. But I just stretched it out a little bit more. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go ahead and set my 0 again. And 3/8 is still eluding me. It is just a hair down, so I need a little bit bigger. So this gray square was a little bit optimistic, so I'm going to have to stretch the gray square bigger, give myself more workspace, stretch it just a little bit bigger. I'm going to go back in, check again, 0, and that's just a little small, so I'm going to go a little bit bigger. Remember, taking your time and getting this measurement right is the key to everything, because if you don't, your candelas are going to be off, your voltage drop calculations, distances are going to be off, and everything else. So you saw I dropped it right there in the center of my doorway, the black spot right in the middle. As far as pixels, what I'm talking about is the height of this little black right here is about 2 pixels high. You can see one here and one here. I put it right about somewhere in the middle or so on this pixel. You can see as I near it, that border right there, I'm right about there on my 0. I'm a little bit off, but it's close enough. It's about a micron of a difference. But so I've started there for my 0, and I'm coming all the way down to the other doorway, about the same thing, about where that pixel is at. And I am just a little bit off, but that is, again, a micron of a difference. So it's pretty dang good. For hand measuring, that's almost immaculate. So we're going to go back up, make sure we didn't mess anything up, and our Y is about the same. And there we go. It's about the same, give or take, I don't know, 120th or so. But it's good enough. So that's about good there. So now my drawing is to scale. I can fit this as tight as I want or whatever, but I like the way it looks here. But I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, and you can see that we have that issue again where that white space on the drawing is actually covering up this gray border that I like. It looks nicer, it looks cleaner, and makes the drawings look nicer. Now I could either delete the gray square around it and lose that, or I can just send this to the back. Now that I have it where I want it, I have the drawing on the page, it's properly sized, I really don't need to mess with that anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it while it's in selection mode. It really doesn't matter, to be quite honest, selection or rotation. But you right click on it, you can't see the menu, but order, back of page. And as soon as I click that, it sent it all the way to the back of the page, the entire document. So now everything I drag onto here is going to be on top of this. And that's important because when you start dragging on your objects and things like that, having those objects go beneath your drawing is one of the most agitating things in the world, because then you're like, where did my object go? I know I dragged that strobe or speaker or whatever device I dragged the representation of onto the drawing, and it just disappears beneath it. It disappears because it's not on the top. Now, consequently, if I do need to make a change to the drawing, I've kind of messed myself up as well, because now it's at the back. So now I'm clicking on this gray square, and in order to do anything to the drawing, and I've even drawn it below this bigger gray square. So now I have two objects on top of my drawing. So you don't want to do it until you're absolutely sure it's in the spot you want it in. Even if you did have an issue and you needed to get to it, the absolute easiest way is to click on the object, confirm what it is, which we know that's this gray square, order, back of page, and this is now below that, but we have the bigger square on top of the drawing still. So right click, now that I've confirmed, back of page, and there we go. Now the drawing is the topmost again, or at least in this section, and I can now manipulate it as I freely feel. Because we also did them in that same order, this gray square will now still be on top of this bigger gray box. It's all about ordering and doing things in a certain pattern. If you throw things off, you'll be able to get through it. You'll just have to work through the sending things back to page and things like that. So I'm done with this drawing as far as moving it around. So I'm going to right click, order, back of page, and there it is. So now that we've gotten that all done, we're ready to start moving things on. So I'm just going to go ahead and place down the things I think I remember. So there was the strobe, there was a speaker, and I believe there was a speaker strobe. So I just drag those items out. You can either do one of two things. You can either drag them out, which is what I like to do, but sometimes it creates a mess if you're using this as the previous drawing, or you can, let's undo and back over there, or what you can do is Control D, which is duplicate. The other thing you could do is right click and then duplicate as well. Actually, there's no option for duplicating that way. It's copy and paste effectively, but by pressing Control and D, you will duplicate the object above itself, approximately an inch or however you have it set up to. I believe the default's about an inch or an inch and a half. I'm not sure. It looks like it's half an inch. So I've duplicated this strobe symbol out. It was a speaker, I think, and a speaker strobe. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these objects, move them over there because that's all I need. If I needed other things, I would select other things as well. But this is all I think I need. So our drawing required a strobe here, I'm sorry, a speaker strobe here, a speaker here, and a regular strobe here. So all I'm going to do is drag and place, drag and place, drag and place. And it's really as simple as that. Now let's go through the for instance of if the drawing was on top of everything and the symbols were underneath them. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these off because I know how the layering works. Bring them together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set the drawing to the front. You don't need to do this, but this is for an example. Okay, I have the drawing right now at the topmost of the page. Everything else is beneath it. That includes these devices. I'm dragging it, and you can see it's going to place it on top. But that's only a visual representation for you to see it as you're holding it. As soon as you let it go, it's going to place it appropriately based off of its ordering status. So these symbols right now should be on top of the gray squares. Okay? But they are going to be underneath this drawing. So as soon as I let go of the strobe, it's going to go beneath the drawing. So there it goes. You can't see it. It's still there. You can see I can select it by dragging. I can still select it by dragging, but it's not there to the eye. When you print it out, it won't be there. But the symbol's still there. You can drag it back out. You realize, oh, this drawing is above everything. I don't want it there. So you can either do one of two things. One, you can select the device symbols, right-click Order to front of page, and now these are in front of everything, no matter what. That can be troublesome if you have things like lines or text bubbles or things like that, because they'll be in front of even the text bubbles. So you could also do the simpler thing, which is Order to back of page on the drawing itself. So now these and everything else, text bubbles, lines, such and such, are going to be in front of the drawing. So let's go ahead and set this back up. I'm just approximating. It doesn't need to be perfect for me, but for you it needs to follow whatever symbol notation you're going off of. So this looks right. There's absolutely no coverage on this side. I realize that, but that's okay for me. So, and actually, you know what? Let's do this for the sake of properness. This is what my layout is going to be. Okay, it's not correct, but this is all demonstration. So this is your layout. You need to have the battery calculations back in there. It doesn't need to be that big. So this gray square can be there. I don't want to select the numbers. You saw even there I had a mistake and I selected something I don't need to. It's okay. I'm going to put this there. And again, this is on top of the bigger gray box, so you can see where the lines kind of meet up. My goal is to kind of match it up so that this little ridge looks continuous. It doesn't need to be continuous, but it needs to look at least a little nice. So that looks good to me. That looks good to me. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so the drawing's there, or the battery calculations are there. I need to change this text dialog. So this text right here is its own entity. I can click it and move it around. Okay, and using the text tool, you can click this A, click anywhere, and just start typing. That's not how you spell typing. Hi, typing. Okay, all your basic word processing things are there. Shift to select text. I can shift and highlight things. Shift home or hit home. Shift N, and I can delete, things of that nature. Your text tools are, so let's do the again. Okay, I'm going to select it. Control A selects anything in a text box. So that's another way to do it. So I controlled A, I highlighted the. You have different dialogues for fonts. I guess it'd be easier for you to see if I actually did it. Over here, there we go. So if I select that, I don't even have to highlight it, and it'll automatically change the whole text box for me. And I can change whatever I want. It'll be that one for now, and I can change the font size. However, in my opinion, the font size doesn't matter very much because you can just stretch it however big you want, or small anyway. So just be wary. It'll automatically correct the font size based off of the font size metric. But if you wanted exact font, like something that needed 12-point font, you can set it automatically to 12-point font. I don't need this, so using the selection tool, I'm going to come over here, click it, and delete. Now, something to be wary of is that the selection tool and the text tool are two different things. So what that means is I'm going to click here, and I can now manipulate it as an object. Okay, if I double click 1, 2, I have now made the selection tool into the text tool automatically, and I am now free to edit this. So let's say this drawing is going to be 919 Milam Street, Suite, I don't know, we'll do 2000. So level 20, but we're going to say it's Suite 2000, and the name of the job is beginnings classes. So we're doing this job for beginning classes, and it's going to be located at Suite 2000, and this is the address. So that's all I need to do there. Okay, I'm going to come over here, do the same thing, just double click multiple times. It's going to be at 919 Milam. I don't know the zip code off the top of my head, but I think it's that. I think that's the zip code. It's not a level, it's a suite, so it's going to be Suite 2000. This is not alert logic, it's beginning class. Is it classes or class? Consistency. Beginning class. Okay, so you can see my text is now completely off the page. Like, there's the end of the page and it's off. And it's outside of the box. And it's outside of the bigger box. So I don't like the way this looks at all. So, like I was saying before, is you have the text tool, and you can click anywhere in it, and it'll start editing like a word processing. If you want to switch it out, you can either go back to the selection tool and click on it, or you can go here and click on this little cross right here in the middle. I'm zooming in so that way it's a higher contrast for you to see. But you can click on this little cross, and you can start dragging things around. And then you can move it about, and that's it. If you try clicking off, you'll only open up dialogues for the text. And that's it. In order to go back, you have to hit either the pick tool, or the selection tool, I like to call it, or you can hit V. No, you can't. Just kidding. Not in this. If you were in some other tool. No? Oh, what's the hotkey for it? Is there no hotkey? I thought there was a hotkey. Maybe I'm thinking of another program. Anyway, you have to click the selection tool in order to go back. So right now, I don't like the way this box looks. It's not the right size. So what I'm going to do is I had pick tool, click the box, I'm going to stretch the box out, and there you go. It now fits it. But it still looks really thick for such a small, thin text area and white. So what we're now in is, I just clicked back into it because I didn't mean to click off. What we're now in is we're actually inside the settings for a rectangle. Using the rectangle tool, I just clicked on it for demonstration, you can drag and leave a rectangle wherever you want. And this is good for like borders or drawing symbols if you're creating your own later on and things of that nature. But what you pretty much have to work with is whether or not you want round corners, corners going in, chamfered corners, things of that nature, how you want the corners to look, move, and the only real thing you need to worry about is outline width. If you make it thicker, it's going to have less room in the middle. So it just opened up a dialog for changing document defaults, and you really don't need to worry about that. Just click OK through. but pretty much if you put something at a high point rate for the thickness of the line, it's going to be super thick. And that's pretty much what we have now. So that's an 8. Let's do a 1. And there you go. Because we still had it selected, it automatically changed it for me, just like with the text tool. Because we had it selected, we were still just editing the options. Now if I click off of it, this will no longer edit it. I mean, it's editing the outside box because I selected that, but not what I meant. I meant if I click off, I'll end up making a new box if I drag, or if I click off, it'll only edit the settings for the next box I make. So if I make a 16-point box, okay, or we have this box here, okay, I have it selected, I can change the size. Now I'm going to click off of the page, or off of an object, or off of a rectangle rather, and now it's thinking that I'm going to make a new text box. So if I set it to 8, it's only going to do 8 for the next box I make. Or if I want a really thin box, I'm going to put it to 0.5, and the next box I make will be super thin. But it won't change any of the previous boxes I've made. So it'll be like a new box, brand new. So you need to be careful of that if you're going to be working with boxes. But I don't like the way this thickness looks. I'm going to go back to selection tool as well. So selection tool, I've selected this box, and now I want it to be thinner. So let's do about half that, 0.4 or 4.0. That looks good. Same thing with this one. That's too thick, so 0.4. And I'm pretty much matching it to these apparently. So this one's too thick. We're going to drop it down to 0.4. This one is going to go to a 0.4. And now we have matching boxes. Now what I like to do is kind of have intersecting lines. So I'm going to move that about there. I could get more detailed and technical if I wanted to. But if I wanted to make them absolutely match up, something I could do is go to the ruler, click on the ruler, drag down. This is not setting your 0. This is setting a guide. So if I wanted this guide to go right about here at 2 inches on the left side, okay, I'm dragging this out from 2 inches. I now have a guide at 2 inches from whatever my 0 was, which was somewhere down here, I believe. It is, yes. So on here on the drawing, this door is my 0. So 2 inches from there, this guide now exists. The reason for guides is if you want, you can have anything you do snap to a guide. Okay, I don't have that setting turned on right now, but at least you can line things up to them. So right now there's that, and that looks pretty spot on actually. So now I'm going to set a vertical guide. I'm going to go to the left one, drag out, and I want to match up with this line. So I'm going to grab this square, drag that out, and it snapped too because it was an edge to an edge. There's tools built into the software to do things like that. However, you have to have it set up properly. So go back, we're going to make this thinner, and there we go. That looks pretty good. We're pretty consistent right now. Okay, so now we have these basically set up, and our drawing looks pretty spiffy. If we wanted to, we could print it out right now, give it out to the guys or whatever technician we're working with to get this drawing done, but this is nowhere near done as far as getting it approved. We still need to set up the legend, we still need to do the voltage drop calculations, and we still need to do candela ratings. And we're going to go over that in the next video.